if you've ever written a keynote talk or any kind of talk, you maybe either used AI already or you thought about doing it. And there are specific giveaways that can show when a talk has been written a little bit too much with help from AI, especially in a keynote. And there are traps that happen before a word's even been written. Many speakers are outsourcing their own judgment, not just speakers, I mean, all of us all over the place are outsourcing our own critical judgment to AI, thinking it must be correct. And it's producing confidently mediocre talks that will end up dying on stage. So I want to tell you a little story about somebody who I worked with who wrote their whole talk with AI and how that went for them. And a little bit about the planning stage and some of the things to look out for on things like the sycophancy and fabrications. And really all the writing stage tells, like the rhetorical padding that you will often see and maybe not even pay that much attention to. I've been seeing it repeatedly in client work, and you'll see it and hear it in other people's talks and probably on their LinkedIn posts and other places as well. Now, if you've tuned into the show before, you maybe already know that I used to be a coach for a very well-known speaker business coaching company. And in that time, I can remember working with a young guy who was very eager to get on stage and talk. And one of the things that he decided to do was a bit of a shortcut because he was so wanting to have his keynote done and be selling it as quickly as possible. I loved his enthusiasm, but there was a problem. He just put a prompt into AI and said, write me a talk about this. And the AI did exactly that. And it was terrible. Now, this was a few years ago. So I'm willing to grant that this was the earlier days of AI tools when things would be very obviously written by AI and very terrible. And I admit that the tools have been getting better and they probably will continue to get better and better, maybe at some point to a level where it will be possible to distinguish whether something has been individually written or written by AI. But we are not there at the moment. And so there are things that you need to watch out for. And I'm aware that that means that this episode could be very dated if you are listening to this a long time after, it's like a year or more after it's been recorded. A lot of what I'm saying might not actually be quite so relevant anymore. But there are some parts of this that I feel will always be relevant to this as well. So in all honesty, AI didn't invent bad keynotes. They certainly existed beforehand as well. But it did help to remove the one person who used to be able to tell you whether they were any good or not before you got on stage. Now, this young guy who had written his keynote all with AI, it was drivel. It really was drivel. This was, let's say, a few years back. AI really wasn't quite so good. It was not even so good in the collaboration parts as it is now. But I remember that there's also one of my friends was coaching him a bit as well. We had a little chat about it because we had both seen the keynote. Now this was in private, no public conversation, but we'd both seen it. And we were laughing a bit, but also mainly because it never got seen by or heard by the public because it was terrible. And we both fed back to him that it was absolutely terrible and he needed to write something himself. And there are a lot of traps that we can easily fall into if we are using AI a little bit too much. Now, you might be thinking, I want to write this talk myself. And here's one thing I think with this, like having talks that are written for you by someone else, it does happen. And there are people who will pay other people, speechwriters, as a great profession, to write talks for them. And I don't think speechwriters should be feeling too threatened just at the moment because even though somebody can just AI write my speech for me, it's not going to be fantastic. I think you might want to make some adaptations and not just deliver whatever AI gives you, but there are undoubtedly going to be people who will just take whatever gets churned out and throw that out into the world. So you're probably going to encounter that in different places. But what happens in good speech writing relationships is the writer will get to know as much as they can about the person that they're writing for, so that they can write in their style, in the way that they speak, write for them, and maybe even try and pull some of their stories in as well. So if they can, they'll have meetings with the person they're writing the talks for. In the situations where that doesn't always get to happen, it's not going to go quite so well. The rapport might not feel quite so strong. There's something's going to feel a little off in the talk. And it is maybe going to feel like the person who delivered the talk didn't actually write it themselves because of those things. Now, there are certain circumstances where that might be acceptable. And in the political world, you're going to encounter that more probably than in the professional speaking world. It is arguable that politics is a form of professional speaking in some ways, but it's not where you're getting paid specifically because you are a speaker, is where speaking is just part of that role for most people. So in the times where you are being paid to be on stage as a speaker, if you come across as insincere, or if you come out with garbage that just doesn't really work or doesn't capture people, doesn't pull them in, it's not going to serve you and it's not going to serve your audience. I've even experimented with having AI help me to write some comedy bits. And I have to say, whilst it comes up with some interesting ideas, and sometimes it gets you very confident about something, oh, that's going to kill, that's going to be hilarious, there's going to be an uproar. It's very rarely right about that because it doesn't have its own personality. It's not a person, it's a thing. It's a collection of knowledge that's been scraped off of different parts of the internet and put into one place to feed you answers. And we are generally all too willing to personify it and see it almost as a friend, an invisible friend that just gives us all the answers that we need to things. And so AI will tell you that your topic's great. It will tell you that you will have no trouble booking it. ChatGPT will give you 97% confidence that you have a great topic and that you're going to do very well with it. And it doesn't know. It doesn't have the information about what kind of talks people are buying. It doesn't have the information about what's actually going on in the industry. It doesn't have the information about what actually even makes a great keynote talk, because most keynote talks are not in the internet. They're not available for it to scrape. Even though some of them may occasionally get transcribed, for the most part, they don't. Like some of them may get videoed and used in-house, but they don't really make it onto public channels where they're likely to be indexed and put into available for AI tools to scrape and to reference for creating talks. And that means that what knowledge it does have, it's pulling from maybe some of the great speeches of all time, political speeches that have been transcribed, maybe comedy sketches and other talks that it has transcriptions for that are available for it, and TED Talks, TEDx Talks, stuff that is readily available. But does that really give you what you need as a professional keynote speaker? Not so much. And you're not going to be wanting to deliver a mountaintop speech to inspire the whole world. You're probably not going to be wanting to just do a TED Talk as well. Well, then it'd be a great experience to have if you get to do TED or TEDx. But AI is going to confidently tell you that your talk is great based on what it has, not actual knowledge. AI is a bunch of data that has been pulled together to give you the best answer that it can give you, but it doesn't know. And even what it does know, even if it's helpful, even if it's useful, is not personal. AI can never have your level of stories, your personal experiences, your emotional experiences, because it doesn't have its own emotions. It can't have your insights into things that actually happen to you. It can't have your unique perspective on a particular situation or thing, because it just doesn't really have that capability. It's just trying to pull out what it thinks is the best answer or the consensus or what it thinks you most want to hear, but it can't give you your own personal insight. And this is part of the problem with putting too much of our thinking into AI tools and getting back whatever we get back and trusting it. And we have a tendency to trust that AI probably knows more than us. And in some sense it does, but there's a sense in which it really doesn't as well, because there are just things that it cannot know, it cannot access, and it cannot help you deliver. And that's partly good news for keynote speakers. Now, I do know that there are people who are completely washing their hands of AI, want nothing to do with it. The data center stuff is very bad. There's lots of ethical reasons not to use it. Privacy and stealing people's work and all these kinds of things. I'm like 100% agree. And I will say that if that's where you're at and you don't want to use AI at all, good for you. It is going to slow you down, but what you may come out with will probably be better and more authentic than what somebody using AI to help them write their keynote is going to be. So that said, I do use it. I do use it to bounce some ideas around, but I don't trust everything that it says. If AI says your talk's going to be booked out in no time and everyone is going to be in high demand, and then you go into the marketplace and you find that's not the case, then it's going to be very disappointing. But that's a hard way to find out. And that means you've trusted your whole research, your whole investment here to AI that isn't going to be able to give you perhaps some of the insight that a coach might. That if you work with a real person who has insight and knowledge of the speaking industry and what people book and what works and what doesn't, and what a keynote needs to look like and be like to be effective and to get booked, and it just doesn't have all this information, and it won't, because these things are not being codified into the industry. And there's so many different opinions and ideas about this that you're going to get different senses of where things are at. You're only ever going to get a sense of it. You're never really going to have full insight that you might get from somebody who's actually in the industry and able to give you valid feedback as to whether what you're doing is going to work or not. AI will fabricate information and will give you false certainty, invented statistics, even invented quotations, studies, and have no equivocation about this as well. It would just say, oh, this is this study or photo. And even if you use Gemini, which is generally better for that kind of research, I think you still have to double check. And I hope that you do. It can be a great research aid to help you back stuff up in your talk that needs backing up. You've probably heard of these sorts of things, but there's been cases where lawyers have put cases into courts and listed statutes that have been relevant to them. And then it's turned out that they used AI and those statutes didn't even exist, but they never checked. And of course, that causes all sorts of problems. And it's not just in those environments, it's pretty much everywhere. The stuff that hasn't actually been checked and isn't even real has been delivered as though it was. There's been leaders in the business world, in politics, pretty much every area, who have just delivered their talks straight off of ChatGPT because they haven't hired a speechwriter, or they just haven't had time and just put some prompts in and read out whatever they got. A real coach will give you some pushback before you even really get to that point of having created your whole keynote based on a fallacy or based on something that might not actually work. And hopefully you'll get enough pushback to know whether what you're doing is commercially viable, whether it's going to resonate with the rooms that you go into, and whether your take is different enough and viable and needed within the organizations that you want to go and speak to. AI just can't tell you that. It can give you its best guess, but it won't be able to give you the actual real pushback as well. And it just won't be able to challenge you in the ways of thinking that a real conversation with a real person will. And the actual personal friction that you can have with somebody when you are being challenged, that pushes us to raise our level of thinking. AI doesn't really push us to raise our thinking at all. It actually encourages us to switch that off and to switch off our skepticism. And that is detrimental. But it keeps you coming back to the AI tool, which of course is what the AI companies want you to do. And maybe that's exactly why it does it. In the writing stage, you've probably already seen this with social media posts and the likes. And I've noticed this. One of the reasons why I've been particularly cutting back on having AI write some of my social media posts or even co-write, because I find that it just uses a lot of rhetorical devices. And whilst I love rhetorical devices in talks, and I think rhetoric is a very interesting area that most of us don't fully understand, but things like the rule of three, tricolon, or the not this but that, these things get deployed because they pattern match to sounds like a keynote, rather than because it was the right rhetorical device to use in the moment. So you'll see that things get padded out with rhetorical devices. The one that I've been seeing a lot recently in posts, and I know it's come up in some of mine as well, because I keep thinking, oh, it makes me wince every time I see it. And this will be outdated probably if you listen to this 6 months, 12 months on from recording, but The one that bothers me the most right now is I keep throwing back this thing of, is this dressed as that? Or is this wearing a coat that's like that? And it is of this, well, there's something in disguise, but it seems to always phrase it in this rhetorical way of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And I see that come up in so many different posts, and I've seen it come up in people's talk content as well. And for me, it's often a signifier. There's like probably used AI for this. I can't be 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure. And I don't really want to see that, because it does mean that you've actually been getting AI to write your talks. So I created a tool to help my clients write their talks, but the tool is only there to help them outline their talks with their own content. It's not allowed, well, specifically under instruction, not to create content for them, but only to pull the content out of them to help them outline and structure a talk. So even if they put the instructions in to create this part or write me this bit, it's not going to do it. It's going to say, no, this is just to outline your talk. And even though I do encourage my clients not to use AI so much in the talking, actually to get very hands-on, writing is, I think writing stuff out is great, but I also find that I used to think, it's better to write stuff out. It feels more personal, but I actually get more creative personally when I'm typing stuff in. So I'll open up a document and I'll just start typing away, and the ideas start to flow. And if I've got a structure to put them into, then that's much, much easier to do that. And I don't see this so much, but it does come up. Like we get these sort of bland, generic stories that probably never really happened. And AI will create stories if it feels that something needs that. But I think telling generic stories in general, like you put your real story content into it, it doesn't really know how to do great storytelling. So it's going to bring it back to you in a way that isn't particularly helpful. I'm going to cover some more of this in my next episode on this in a few weeks' time. A common thread against every chapter in working with AI to create your keynotes is having confidence without stakes. AI can't lose a booking for you, so it never really needs to hedge on something like something's on the line. It can just very confidently tell you that this is right, or what you've done is great, or you've created the most phenomenal keynote that's ever been written. And you're thinking, wow, this must be really amazing, going to blow people's minds with it. And it has no idea what market response to that is going to be like. Everything AI writes for your keynote sounds finished. But that's the tell. Nothing that's actually true costs that little to say. There has to be stakes. When you put something out into the marketplace, stakes are on the line, and false confidence has been given to you by an AI tool is not going to save you. So in the next episode, I want to talk a little bit more about what AI genuinely can't do, which is stories, also your frameworks, and we're going to get a bit more into that. And I've got a great episode coming up towards the end of the month on frameworks with Susanna Ray. Susanna was a good friend of mine, and she has an amazing book on framework thinking that I can't wait to bring you that episode. Her book is phenomenal, and we'll talk all about that very soon. But next week, I'm going to be bringing you an interview, returning guest, a chap called Mike Verrett, a marketing expert. He's going to be talking about how you can really develop the relationships that you need to have in the industry and talk effectively about what you do to be able to help you position yourself. So we all love those positioning conversations. We have a bit of that discussion with Mike. Tune in for that next week. Not one to miss. We'll be back talking more about AI in a couple of weeks, then followed by Susanna Ray's amazing episode, which I 100% urge you not to miss, and more great stuff coming after that as well. With all of that, if you're writing a talk right now and you need a bit of help, get the help you need, but don't trust that AI is going to be able to deliver it for you. If you want to have a conversation about that, reach out to me. All my contact information is in the show notes, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you to see if there's any way I might be able to help or direct you in doing that. But for now, until the next episode, go and do something worth talking about. I'll see you next time.